A few days ago, I came across a video called The Power of Silence in Life. I can link it in the description if you guys are interested in watching the full thing. It was not about music, it was about life. It was talking about how silence is a way to calm the mind, boost creativity, and basically reset your whole nervous system. Also, it's a way to show respect and make a powerful point. This got me thinking about the power of silence in music. We often focus on sound, melody, harmony, rhythm, different things. We talked about it in the last episode about how to hear like a composer, that you can go ahead and watch it here, and that was all about how to really focus on these detailed elements in music. But silence is also as important. It shapes everything around itself. So in this video, I want to explore what silence means in music, how composers in different eras use silence intentionally to intensify the message they're trying to share with us, and why silence is one of the most powerful tools that we have as musicians. But before that, if you're interested in my videos, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Also, we're not focusing on piano repertoire today. We have opera, we have orchestra, and a lot of symphonies that we want to talk about, but you can also find it in a lot of different like solo pieces, like a lot of chamber music pieces. It's everywhere basically. So I try to choose the pieces that are mostly well known, even to non-classical musicians, and kind of like explore how the silence works in those works. So let's talk about classical era first. I can go on and on about the style of composition, the style of performance, and everything in that era, but I want to like keep our focus on silence. Silence was really structural. It was something to really articulate the phrases, to control the pace of the composition, and also create a lot of comic and dramatic effect. If you go, for example, watch a lot of Mozart's operas, especially the ones that are funny, you can see that there's a lot of moments that he's using silence intentionally to kind of like make that comic moment more effective. But instead of looking at Mozart, I want to talk about Beethoven's, like his iconic theme of Fifth Symphony that I'm sure you guys know it. So the first motif, which repeats so many times and it gets developing and evolving throughout the first movement. So if you listen to it, there's a silence right before every time this phrase starts. And I think that really makes that one of the most powerful motifs in the history of classical music. Let's just listen to it a little bit. So that's basically the beginning of that symphony. I mean, it goes on and on, it kind of like keeps developing. But before each time that this motif starts, there is a pause. And I think, as I said, it makes it way more powerful. So now let's look at a different example. We're gonna look at Haydn's Creation, Oratorio. It's such a powerful piece. I really wanted to keep going when I was looking for examples, and I came across this piece. It's magnificent. It's like otherworldly. I can just listen to this piece on and on. It's a long one. We're not going to look at all of it, but let's just listen to the first, like this is the first part of it, and it's not the beginning. It's the where I'll show you guys where to look at it, where to listen to, but this is the very first movement. And it's called The Creation. It's all in German, but I really like the lyrics too, so I put there's a translation here for you guys to also see. This guy's voice is just like, I don't know, no, I don't have words for it.
Finsternis war auf der Fläche der Tiefe.
So I'm gonna skip a little bit because I want to show you that exact moment that he's using silence, but I really highly recommend you guys to go watch this video or watch another version of it. It's called The Creation by Haydn. This really makes me want to learn German. I tried learning German years ago, and I tried a semester of learning it, and it was I quit basically. I think I tried it 2 or 3 times at least in my life to start really learning it, but every time I quit because it's so complicated, and I feel like you need a really strong motivation to really stick with it. And I know even if I speak German, this is a whole different style of German because it's very poetic. It's the German that they use in literature, but German literature really makes me want to learn German. It's a whole big commitment. But anyway, let's just skip a little bit, and here I want you to listen to when the chorus kind of enters. Here. So here is the moment when the chorus says, "Let there be light," and there is kind of there's a silence a little bit, and then the instruments kind of respond very minimalistically, and then the chorus respond again. Moving on from the classical era, there is a ton of other examples. I could just go on and on. This could be a 2-part video just about the classical era, but you get what I'm talking about. Let's move on to the Romantic era. So it was kind of a emotion and atmosphere thing, creating space basically. Dvořák and his Ninth Symphony, if you have listened to the second movement, which has a very famous theme, and it's when I teach piano, that's in most of the method books, that the simplified version of that theme. It's very a slow, lyrical, and very nostalgic. But notice how in this piece, silence, it is in most of the pieces, is not to interrupt the flow of the music. I think it's just there to complement it, and also silence is part of the flow. So you don't really feel like you are listening or hearing moments of silence unless you're at the score or really pay attention to it. And that's because they used it in such a nice way that it kind of is part of the flow of the music. Let's look at the Dvořák first. This is the second movement. And again, this is such an iconic piece, but I want you to follow this famous theme and realize how there's a silence somewhere. I love the first movement, and I know that everybody who listens to the first movement of it immediately think of Star Wars, and that's because John Williams got the inspiration from this. He, like Dvořák, that was not inspired by John Williams. It's the opposite. And I mean, both of these songs, both Star Wars music and the first movement, are such cool pieces. And I really love this symphony. It's called the New World Symphony. It was about America, basically the New World. The second one that I want to show you, it's Mahler. If you haven't listened to Mahler, I highly recommend listening to his symphonies. They are huge. First of all, they're so long, so don't try to force yourself to listen to a whole symphony in one sitting. But it's I mean, Mahler is like the king of like having these enormous orchestras that are, I don't know, 100 people there. Like, and compare that to the orchestras that were in the classical era that were such a small group that you wouldn't necessarily need a conductor. These orchestras, like in the Romantic era, especially with Mahler and different composers back then, it just kind of like they needed so many strings, so many performers, and so many like instrumentalists to actually play that. It was like a huge thing. They were much longer, much more complicated structure wise, and also different like themes, and the harmony got more complex. And it's not easy to listen to, and I understand that. But let's listen to, this is his ninth symphony, and it's the last 5 minutes. We're not gonna listen to the whole thing, but notice how the music ends about 5:20 that you can't really hear. This is an example where the music goes so soft that you can no longer figure out the border between silence or super soft orchestra or music. And that kind of like flows or eases us into the end of the piece. It's not an abrupt end. So you can't really hear anything anymore. And even before it ends, it was really quiet, but he's still conducting. And this means, like, I think to the audience that do not applause. And notice how the string players still have their bow here. So that means it's not done yet, even though the music might be done. But whenever they have their strings like that, the bow like that, or whenever like the flute players, for example, have their flute, I don't know how to hold a flute, but have it like that, that means the music is not done yet. So either other players are playing, or like this example, it's kind of like we're trying to stay in the mood. So that's also another sign that the audience should just stay quiet, and they should not clap. And once they bring the bow down, that kind of is a sign that music is done. And now he brought the bow down. He brought the, everyone is bringing their instruments down. Imagine a baby just starting crying right now, which is not, it happens a lot in concerts. And here the applause begins. I think they were also hesitant to do that, but I feel like if you're in that hall, it creates such a like, I don't know, like a powerful moment. And that's what we were talking about in the intro, that silence can be very powerful in a ways that music or melody could never be. And that's in that video that I mentioned that I watched it, he was talking about like the scientific reasons why, for example, we are silent if we are like paying respect to someone. For example, at an event where everybody is like silent for 2 minutes to pay tribute to something or somebody that has passed away. That would be the end of the Romantic era for us. Again, so many other examples. Mahler has a ton of those, like in his symphonies. So you guys can go ahead and figure that out. But moving on to my favorite era of music, 20th century. There's so many different like branches of music, so you can no longer label 20th century music as like something like classical era that is like, okay, these are all the features that you can see in the compositions of that era, or like romantic era. It no longer has that, but something that it does have, it's a lot of experimental movements that happen, and every composer is trying to bring something new. And that's like, again, a different video or a different story. But now we are gonna look at two composers. I'm gonna save the most famous one for the end of the video, but now we are gonna look at Toro Takamitsu's piece. He is a Japanese composer, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, he's a Japanese composer. He has a lot of interesting pieces for piano or for orchestra. And in this piece that we're going to talk about, it's called Corona. It was written in 1962, and the beginning of it, it's kind of like a mix of electronics. We're going to look at it in a second, but the piece kind of like everything unfolds slowly, and then he uses silence in the beginning part, like the first minute or so. So that was a moment of silence. Yeah, the same thing happening. And I like that it happens also in the visuals as well. So like I know it's kind of like the editing part of it, but it kind of goes dark. So it shows you that it's like the patterns and fragments that keep repeating. So we don't have to listen to the whole thing, but if you guys are interested in those kind of music or those kind of compositional style, he's one of the, like, I think one of the most like important people in the 20th century. He also has other pieces that are not necessarily that weird or like that experimental. He has a bunch of like piano music that are like just beautiful. Like if you're not interested in like these kind of atonal experimental music, make sure to check those out. But let's move on to maybe the most famous piece of music in classical music when you think about using silences in music. It's John Cage 433. That, imagine you're in a concert, someone or a pianist walks on the stage, opens the piano, and plays nothing. So that's literally the piece for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. I'm sure if you're a musician, a classical musician, you might have heard about this piece or you know this piece, and you might think it's a joke, but it's not. And John Cage is not making fun of music. He was actually a very respected, a very well-known composer of the 20th century, but he was basically, again, like back here to the idea of being like experimenting with music and different technology like electronic or different like abilities of traditional instrument like piano, violin, flute, etc. He was challenging sound. During that 4 minutes 33 seconds that you're silent on stage, anything that has a sound, that's the music. And so every time you perform this piece, it's a new piece, because anything from like the breathing of the audience, if a baby cries, if somebody coughs or sneezes, or like any movement of the performer, if they move on the piano, if like a chair creaks, anything, that is the music of that moment that you're performing that piece. And by doing that, I mean, he has a lot of other works that are like way more like complicated, but for some reason this piece, I mean, not for some reason, I can understand why this piece is his most famous work. But if you're interested in John Cage, make sure to like check out his piano sonatas, interludes. He has also a lot of things that are very, again, extended piano techniques. You have to like put like things in the piano and make sure you do it in a piano that you know that you can do that, and then basically like having a bunch of different sound effects on the piano. But in this case, he was trying to show that silence is never empty. It's just uncontrolled sound, and anything that can be a part of that music, silence is a piece. And then if you're wondering about like how to perform that, I've actually been to live performances of this piece. So it's usually like part of the way that I've been to and I've listened to that is the performer chooses different parts of like different pieces that kind of have the same meaning, or it's kind of tied together, and they usually end the concert with this. So and it's been always like multimedia series, that is, there's always something on the string. But I also seen it that is just performed like normally, so after you play that, like you can just play that, like, so it's not just like I go on stage and play nothing and then come back. It's usually part of a bigger recital or program, which makes it make sense, because then in those time you can just listen to your environment and what's happening. I thought it was just an interesting concept to think about and to listen to. I know it might be something that we take for granted, and it might feel so obvious that okay, silence exists, but it's also interesting to think about how you can use it intentionally, as such like these composers did. It kind of like gives shape to the sound that we are listening or hearing before or after. Kind of reminds me of music is not just what you're playing, it's also what you're not playing. So next time you're listening to something, make sure you notice the silences, because they're not empty and they're alive.